I will introduce you to Andrea Haase from the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, BFR, where she heads the unit of fiber and nanotoxicology. So please go ahead, Andrea.
Thanks again very much to the organizers for being so kind to invite me, and it's my pleasure to provide some insights from a regulatory perspective on safe and sustainable by design, and specifically focusing on the topic of advanced materials. So basically my talk will be structured as such that I would like to give you a very brief introduction, mainly from the perspective of the institute that I'm working for, which is the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment. Then I will come to the point to introduce to you a publication that we have recently finished together with our colleagues from UBA and Bauer, being a joint perspective from the higher German authorities on risk governance of advanced materials. And that basically also was kind of an initiation point for establishing a German interagency working group on advanced materials that I'm chairing. And if you like, so that also is kind of regulatory preparedness in practice. And I will end my presentation with giving you some outlook on work that is currently ongoing in research projects where we are involved. Okay, so just to briefly introduce to you the institute that I am working for, the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment. You see here some nice photographs, and basically the headquarters is depicted in the upper right picture. This is also where I am currently still sitting. Nobody knows what will happen in the near future due to COVID situation. But okay, so this is where we are in Berlin. We have 3 locations, and a BFR is quite broadly covering different fields of competences that all have the common goal to ensure consumer safety in Germany. So that means we broadly deal with food safety, biological safety, safety of substances and mixtures, safety of consumer products, but also we engage in experimental toxicology and risk communication. So basically, if you like, these are 3 sectors: healthy animals, healthy food, and healthy people. The responsibilities of a BFR, of course, as the name suggests, is to engage in risk assessment according to internationally recognized scientific criteria, as well as to engage in national, European, international bodies, of course, like OECD, that has been mentioned already, WHO, working closely with ECHA, EFSA, SCCS at a European level. And we actively engage in research, and we have several cooperations internationally and on a European level. And all these activities are conducted primarily to strengthen the risk assessment processes. And last but not least, and very importantly, we also have a legal obligation for risk communication to inform the public in a transparent, comprehensive, comprehensible manner, and also not only to inform them, but also to engage with them. So we have different platforms for that as well. So now coming to the topic of advanced materials. So let me maybe start with the challenges that are lying ahead of us, be it at the global level, as depicted in the figure below. We have global challenges with respect to sustainable development that have been released by the United Nations, but also on the European level, specifically challenges related to the European Green Deal, like reduced emissions, but also reduce external energy dependency, and also to improve health and well-being. So all these challenges together, we believe that advanced materials will be a very important pillar to achieve at least several of these goals. However, in order to do so, advanced materials will need to be safe and sustainable. Unfortunately, I did not really go into detail on that. There is not a precise working definition for what actually are advanced materials. There are different working definitions that have some common elements. And so what I have included here on this slide is a working definition that has been worked out in a teamwork in our German interagency working group. And we propose to use the term as such that advanced materials are materials that are rationally structured and designed through the precise control of their composition and internal or external structure in order to fulfill new functional requirements. We will come back to this definition anyhow in a few slides later on. Just let me introduce to you a few of the topics that are relevant from the perspective of BFR, just to give you some examples. What kind of advanced materials are we talking about? Specifically for us relevant are nanocarriers. As you know, they are not only important for medical application, but also can be used in cosmetics and food sector for biocides and pesticides. We are currently pretty much dealing with multi-component materials, specifically nanomaterials. So we will come back to that when I talk about the work going on in the European project Harmless at the end of my presentation. So basically these advanced materials are composed of different chemical substances, however, in a highly structured manner. So it's not just like a mixture. But also more specifically going to, let's say, products. We have advanced textiles that can mediate many different properties like heat resistance, UV protection. Also more and more, we have smart textiles that can measure, for instance, blood pressure or walking distances in shoe soles. We have advanced food contact materials. We have many wearables like smart watches, smart glasses, and also the implants are coming up in the consumer sector in the form of smart tattoos, and so on. And last but not least, there are many innovative production processes like, for instance, 3D printing or electrospinning. So anyhow, there are many different angles towards the topic advanced materials, and this is why we are currently dealing with that. Let me now come to a joint perspective that has been worked out by the German federal higher authorities, BAUER, BFR, and UBA, dealing with risk governance of advanced materials. So basically, I introduced to you BFR being responsible for consumer safety. BAUER are our colleagues being responsible for occupational safety, and our colleagues from UBA, and I have seen also Katrin being present today, they are responsible for environmental safety. So we have worked out together a publication entitled Risk Governance of Advanced Material. A draft version has been shared already. So for those that attended the international conference, a thematic conference that happened in June. However, the final version is now more or less available and hopefully will be released very soon. So let me introduce to you some of the concepts that have been presented in this publication, starting with regulatory challenges. So it's maybe not exhaustive, that list, but basically starting already with the fact that advanced materials comprise a very large variety of different material types. So we are talking here of materials with very different chemical composition, different structures, different properties, functionalities. And actually nanomaterials are a subgroup of the advanced materials. So basically the first approach that we suggest is not to approach them as a whole, but rather we would like to follow a targeted approach aiming to identify materials of concern as early as possible. I will introduce the material of concern concept to you in a few seconds. But just as one important message from our perspective, we think it's not advisable or feasible to try to target this very heterogeneous group of material as an entity. The second important consideration is that advanced materials are usually defined by the fact that they show advanced properties compared to what are considered conventional material. So having a look at this, the term advanced is clearly subject to a time component. Therefore, our concept of material of concern is not limited to advanced materials only. Yeah, and I will elaborate a little bit more on that later on, but we believe it is important to identify those materials that pose a specific concern with respect to safety, regardless on when it has been developed. The third challenge that is also quite obvious is that the term material is not used and not known in EU chemical safety regulation. So that also bears some challenges when we look at this very heterogeneous group. There are some advanced materials that would be considered chemical substances. There are others that might be considered mixtures, and there are yet others that could be considered articles, and later on some of them or several of them might end up in the waste stream. And the last challenge that we describe in our publication are challenges with respect to missing testing and risk assessment methods and lack of data. We also introduce a few specific material classes, and also we propose some approaches how to tackle that with respect to research needs. Anyhow, an overarching message that we would like to make in our publication is the fact that as constantly new materials are developed, we think it's simply not feasible to assess each and every variant for all possible adverse effects for human and the environment. And therefore, we believe it is highly needed that a broader concept for the governance of materials is developed. So basically, the main underlying message is that beside all the technological considerations, we need to address issues of safety and sustainability very early on, and to develop such a fundamental understanding of innovation that would enable to maintain the precautionary principle, but at the same time to consider aspects of safety and sustainability early on during the innovation process, as only that would facilitate the transition to a sustainable society. So that is basically the central topic behind the different considerations that we make in the publication with respect to risk governance. And I already mentioned that one challenge is that EU chemical regulation does not know the term material. So then how can we approach the problem that we would like to identify material of concerns? And for that, we looked into different other available documents, and we found a council directive that basically deals with hazardous chemical agents, and that basically we took as a foundation to develop our material of concern concept. So basically, starting with the general consideration that the material could be a substance, could be a mixture, could be an article, or could be in waste. And of course, the upper panel that is depicted below is quite straightforward. So when we look at substances or mixtures, those might be of concern if these substances are hazardous according to the CLP regulation, as well as the mixtures are considered a concern if they contain a substance that is considered hazardous. For an article, the concern could be triggered by the potential release of hazardous substances or mixtures, again, according to CLP regulation. And for the waste, there is in place a hazardous waste regulation. However, on top of that, we believe there could be other risks for human or the environment. Yeah, so that is basically described better, I think, in the next slide, that basically summarizes our proposal for a definition of materials of concern. So a material of concern could be a material that meets the classification as a hazardous substance or a hazardous mixture within the meaning of the criteria set out in the CLP regulation. Or it could be a material, so that would be a material that is considered an article from which hazardous substances or mixtures according to the criteria defined under bullet point 1 can arise or can be released during the production or over the life cycle. Or it can be a material which does not meet these criteria, but because of specific other morphological, physicochemical, ecotoxicological or toxicological or release properties triggers a specific concern. Let me give you an example to make that more transparent or more clear. So the whole concept behind that is that we currently face a materials universe, and within this materials universe there might be individual materials or specific materials that pose a concern. And what we propose here is that we need to develop scientific criteria that enable the identification of these so-called materials of concern early on, during already maybe the pre-market phase, during innovation or whatever. So these scientific criteria need to be developed. And of course, we can build on the CLP regulation, but only as one element. So we already foresee that there might be other criteria. For instance, could be morphological criteria like the fiber toxicological paradigm, where a specific morphology triggers a specific hazard or a specific concern that then needs to be evaluated and substantiated. So basically this is meant with the bullet point 3. So there might be other criteria, or maybe for the environmental safety, one of the criteria that is of overarching relevance is the biopersistence of substances. So this is meant with this bullet point 3, that other criteria might need to be considered on top of what we currently consider a hazardous substance or a hazardous mixture. And what I forgot to mention is that the material of concern concept, please, needs to be clearly separated from what is the substances of very high concern that is currently in place in regulations such as REACH. So please, this is nothing that needs to be connected or that should be connected. So the materials of concern concept is something that we propose to be used early on when you deal with a large variety of different material, and that gives you criteria at your hand to identify out of these plenty material those that deserve an in-depth evaluation. Yeah. And importantly, this definition should cover all the materials and should not be limited to advanced materials only. After having identified materials that are of concern, then more data is needed to substantiate the evaluation. And in this context, also risk scoring systems can be highly supportive. Within BFR, we have worked out the NACI risk scoring system that meanwhile we have also introduced to our colleagues from the other agencies, and that will be the basis for work in our German interagency working group. And this NACI risk scoring system is also presented in the risk governance publication. So basically, this system allows you to score potential risk according to a very simple 5 criteria. And this is meant to be applied in a scenario where maybe not in-depth data is available. So also you can use expert judging to do an evaluation. These 5 criteria are behind the letters NESI. So the first criteria is the novelty criteria. So is the material that we deal with, is it old or is it new? How long is it known already? The second letter is for exposure. So is the expected exposure low or is it high? The third letter is severity. So how severe are the effects to be expected, low or high effects? And the fourth letter is for the scope. So who will be affected? Is it a rather narrow, tiny application that only a few, let's say, consumers will meet, or is it something that is widely applied and that is a concern for, let's say, more general population? And the last letter is for immediacy. So how immediate is an action needed? And as said, you can, of course, use detailed data to underpin these criteria. So currently, we work out specific questions that help to analyze the individual overarching categories, but also you can do an estimation or an first expert judgment with little data, but then of course the uncertainty will be quite high. Anyhow, it is a risk scoring system that helps you to come up with an opinion whether or not further in-depth evaluation is needed and how urgent is the further actions that are required. Okay, so within the publication, we also propose a regulatory preparedness concept that has to do with the methods. So we propose that the regulatory readiness level of measurement, testing, and evaluation method and tools should be assessed to keep pace with the innovation, and that basically these regulatory readiness levels should match the technology readiness levels of advanced materials. I think we are all familiar with the regulatory readiness level scale that is also used for European project, but at the same time, we can basically look at the regulatory readiness level scale of the underlying methods. And this both has to match each other in order to keep pace with the innovation. And yeah, then let's come already to the German Interagency Group on Advanced Materials. So that group has been established with the overarching aim to establish an early warning system. Of course, underlying to that, there are many individual activities. The second overarching aim of the group is to establish a regular communication platform and an open exchange to make use of the complementary expertise that the different agencies have and to consider their different perspectives from the very beginning. And together, we discuss and develop governance strategies for tackling emerging risk of advanced materials. Okay, so that slide is summarizing the different participants. So we have participants coming from different agencies, broadly covering all different perspectives, be it the consumer sector, the occupational sector, the environmental safety sector, but also drugs and medical devices, metrological expertise, Max Rubner Institute being responsible for food safety. So all of that, and moreover, we have a few observers from different federal ministries. We discussed several topics so far, just to give you a flavor what topics we are discussing. Specifically, the fiber topic is of overarching interest, the topic of nanocarriers, smart nanomaterials like materials that are active, adaptive, or stimuli responsive, multi-component materials or multi-component nanomaterials are a topic. What is more, let's say, future is nanobiomaterials or bio-nanomaterials or living materials, because they are not yet close to the market. And then also what we discuss is innovative production processes. I would like to end my presentation with giving you some insights from current research projects, and I would like to do that from the perspective of Harmless, which is a European project that has been kicked off at the beginning of this year. Harmless is dealing with advanced high aspect ratio and multi-component materials, and we are working towards comprehensive intelligent testing and safe by design strategies. The coordination is with the Helmholtz Center in Munich, Tobias Stöger and Ottmar Schmidt, and 19 partners spanning different research, governmental, small and medium enterprises and industry from 11 countries are working together. You see the logos below, and beside you see industrial relevant advanced materials that are considered within the project. So we pick them from different applications, from the pesticides sector, like these metal doped immobilites, paint formulations, from silica polymer bases, paper making, catalyst, solar cells, and facade insulation. And actually, I have seen that quite many partners from Harmless are also present today. So that is basically the concept, how we are tackling that. So we have a work package that deals with a sound understanding of existing data and the interplay of nanomaterial properties with functionality, hazard and exposure. A huge focus of the project is to generate basically new data, considering AOPs, adverse outcome pathways, and YATAs, integrated approaches to testing and assessment. The whole project is pretty much built on the new approach methodologies, and I'm sure that later on during this workshop you will hear many more details on that. But please let me specifically highlight the work package that deals with the safe innovation approaches and the safe by design case studies. So that, I think, is of overarching interest. And here I just would like to mention 3 of them to give you a little flavor. 3 out of 6 industrial relevant safe by design case studies are summarized in this slide. They have been initiated by specific concerns and also to span the safe by design space. So the catalyst based on perovskite is an example where the concern is coming from the heavy metal reactivity and the potential leaching of these materials. We have another case study on aerogel fiber mats that is basically made from silica. It's a porous material, and here we have a fiber morphology, but at the same time we have some special other components. And if you have questions, maybe we can ask the partners from the project that are here today to answer them. And then we have the metal doped immobilite nanotubes. So here also there is the potential of leaching of these materials. So for each of these safe by design case studies, these are real industrial relevant case studies with specific concerns and with specific considerations for the safe by design space. So that is basically the space that spans the flexibility that you have, or the possibilities to modify the system. Okay, and the last slide, just to give you an outlook on something that has been submitted. So it is a project that we have submitted. It is a German project from the National Research Data Infrastructure. There's a consortium, Innomat Safety, that deals specifically with innovative material and with the data underpinning the whole field. And as we heard several times already, that data is of central importance, and we need data to substantiate our evaluations and assessment. And at the same time, we also need data to enable safe by design approaches. We believe that this project could be an important contribution to ensure a sustainable approach to deliver a data infrastructure that is all needed. Yeah, okay, having said that, I would like to end with acknowledging the colleagues that helped me specifically on the risk governance publication from BFR. I have to acknowledge Jutta Tenschert and Ulrike Bernauer, the colleagues from Bauer, Volker Bachmann and Rolf Backhoff, and from UBA, Doris Völker and Katrin Spörn, then all the colleagues from the German Interagency Working Group and the project partner from Harmless. I thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I was clear enough, and otherwise I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Really great overview.